Okay. Um, Somebody in New York requested me to give the BBC. This was already a couple of weeks ago, and what he was saying, and I haven't gotten around to giving that BBC. So that's what today is about, because some things have recently happened that really mean I need to give this BBC and not procrastinate anymore. Okay. So somebody's saying, he's saying, I need help, and so do many others I know who are trying to live with empathy and compassion. This last week felt unbearable. And then he talked about what's going on in Gaza, the invasion, and the devastation, the shooting of the children in the Catholic schools. Yeah. Um, and then US policies excluding the uninsured from access to COVID vaccines, and so on. This was as of 2 weeks ago. Okay, so, um, and he's saying, how do I deal with all this? Yeah. Okay, so there's one person whose name I remember seeing in the news, but I don't really know who he is. And his name is Charlie Kirk. Okay. And some of you may know more about him. So, what I learned is he is 31 years old. And when he was 18, he started to get involved with Trump. He's now very close to Trump. He is a co founder of this organization called Turning Point that really was very strong in the last election to get votes for young people to vote for Trump. Okay. And his views are pretty conservative. Um, yeah, just kind of the usual thing. Um, Thinking that the country is overrun by immigrants and is the white population is going to be replaced by immigrants who aren't white. And, he's very much for the Second Amendment, saying that even if it means that some unfortunate people get killed, it'll actually save lives because everybody will have a gun. I don't follow the logic, but that's his view. He's very, very popular and travels around and speaks uh, about his agenda, um, and has these kind of debates, especially with young people, called Prove Me Wrong, and where they debate some of these uh, contemporary political issues. He's very close with Trump and has been since Trump's first uh, bout in the office. Um, and yeah, and quite popular. Yeah, knows Trump and the family personally, goes and speaks and has big crowds about conservative issues. So he was giving a talk at a university in Utah yesterday, okay? And it was outdoors in an amphitheater. He was under a small tent, you know, and then there were, I don't know, 2 or 3 thousand people there, mostly young, some of them older. Anyway, he was about 20 minutes into his talk, and a shot rang out, and it went in the back of his neck, and blood spurted out, and they rushed him. There was only one shot, hit him in the back of the neck. They rushed him to the hospital. He died. Okay. So, yeah, that's what happened. What is really alarming is to me, is people's reaction to this. Okay. So um, I think most people on both sides, right and left, most people, not all of them, but most people have been condemning, you know, it's basically Trump called it an assassination. And that's what it looks like to me. It was one shot to one person and nobody else got shot. Yeah, they haven't, at least as of a few hours ago, they haven't found the person who did it yet, but they have some pictures and it looks like a young person. Yeah, maybe a college age student. Okay, so there's a lot of people who are saying, you know, this can't be how we handle political differences. Yeah. And but then there's people on the right who are saying they attacked us. This is war. Yeah, this is war. And, you know, all this stuff, especially on these chat rooms where kind of the more radical people gather that are saying this is war, we have to retaliate. Um, yeah, no, 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 no. Then there's people on the left who are saying, you know, oh, well, maybe it is war. If the people on the right want to have a war, we want to have a war too, you know. And then there's, I read something by someone who studies extreme groups. Yeah. And, uh, and this person was saying that, you know, the partisan divide in the country is so great that there's a lot of, um, you know, groups of people, especially I think on the right, who, uh, you know, are really feeling like it's time to have a war, and a civil war, because the country just cannot solve its problems together. So, like the guy from, was it Proud Boys? Yeah, he also, you know, because all this is going on in social media. Yeah, saying it's war, and this person who studies extreme groups was saying that there's a lot of these kind of groups, probably on both sides, right and left, um, who are just kind of waiting for the trigger so that they have everything ready so that they can actually pick up their arms and start fighting. Okay. And I was thinking of how World War One started. Yeah, there was tension building up with the Ottoman Empire and the Habsburg Empire and the Austro-Hungarian, I think that was the Habsburgs, all this tension building up. And the Duke of some small area in the, I think it was Croatia, around that area, yeah, was riding in a vehicle and somebody assassinated him. And that was the trigger for the explosion of World War One, which was a war that totally changed the world very much. All these empires kind of fell apart, and that's led to part of the reason why we have a mess in the Middle East now, if you know the history of it. Okay, so there's all this talk, and there's been talk of a civil war online, you know, and it even makes it in the mainstream media, just the fact that people are talking about this. So, with this guy who was a favorite of the right, who was so popular, who so many people looked to as the one who was going to carry the view of the right forward in history and bring all the young people into the fold with his organization of Turning Point. You know, his assassination, his Kurt killing, was just, the sky falling, okay? And very, very upset. So then there's all this talk going on. And, some, uh, I thought when, I read this, that, oh, maybe people, since it was somebody on the right who was a Republican, maybe people would consider more practical gun laws after this. Well, I said maybe, yeah. Uh, and I think there were some Republicans who may agree with that. But the person that spoke the loudest, Nancy Macy, or Nance Macy, whatever her name is, she's a congresswoman or a senator, I forget. Anyway, she said, no, you know, we're all for guns. This is it. Yeah. So I can just imagine the people that listen to our BBCs and the people who live here being rather um, fearful, maybe, or anxious, or who knows what. Yeah. So how do we, relate to what's happening in the world in these times when, if things advance, yeah, and armed fighting could break out, you know, um, the person who wrote me the email 2 weeks ago before this event yesterday was saying, how do we keep our empathy and compassion? And should we keep our empathy and compassion? Or should we jump in and be angry? Because these people have, murdered somebody and people are talking about war and we got to stick up for our side. And if they start a war, we're going to pick up our arms and we're going to fight back because we have to protect our property and our way of life and everything. Yeah, you guys don't look too like you want to do that. No. Oh, what, you want to do it? No, you don't want to do it. Yeah. Huh? So, yeah, of course we don't want to do this kind of thing. Yeah. So, what do we do with our emotions? Yeah. Because you can see how this is such a good example of one person dying and the incredible, um, what do you call it? Just expansive hallucination that people are going through, imagining this and that, and we should do this and that. And these people over there who are the enemy are doing this and that. People pointing fingers. And, what have human beings resorted to historically when there's conflict is you take up arms and you fight like animals. Except, yeah, the animals only really fight when there's danger to their lives. Yeah. The turkeys have been acting up the last few weeks, if you've noticed. Yeah. They and they've been pecking at each other. But that's all they've been doing is pecking. There was a big kerfuffle a few days ago. I had to go in and break it up and shoo this group of turkeys and that group of turkeys. Yeah, I wish I could do that to human beings. Just go in there and shoo the two groups in opposite directions. Of course, the turkeys didn't listen to me, but but eventually they kind of separated. But human beings, because of our conceptual mind and this whole ability we have to blow things way, way, way out of proportion and jump to the future and create horror stories about things that have never happened, but the horror stories plant the seeds for those things to happen, then people are getting more ruffled up than the turkeys, you know? So what do we do? It's, to me, it keeps coming back to what are our values? What is important for us in our life? Uh, So, what is important? Is it more important? How do we stick up for what we believe in? And, you know, as people who are Buddhists, who are pacifists, yeah, the way we stick up is through giving BBC talks and joining in interreligious dialogue and joining in any kind of dialogue that comes with people who believe differently than we do. Yeah. Because we believe in, trying to settle disagreements by talking. The governor of Utah, where this occurred, yeah, is also talking about, not jumping to conclusions. And he has an expression about we should disagree. What was the word he used? Kind of nicely. Of course, we're going to disagree, but we should disagree nicely. We don't need to clobber each other. Of course, some people are criticizing him because he's advocating, that people talk to each other and calm down and that there's not more violence. Yeah. But this is the way, we have to always come back to our values, to what's important in our life. And even in some extreme situation, which may, which I hope will never happen, where we're confronted with, physical violence. Yeah. It reminds me of what Venerable Master, I never say the names right, from City of a Thousand Buddhas. How do I say his name? Shinwa. Yeah. So they have a center in Northern California, and some years ago, after they opened their monastery there was a big demonstration of people coming and staying outside their gates saying, "We don't want you here, you're foreigners, you're not Christian, yeah, you're not white, we don't want you here," yelling and screaming. Yeah. It was a summer day and they were really protesting quite significantly. So, what did Master Shenhua do? He told his disciples to go and, because it was a hot summer day, invite them in and have something to drink so that they don't get dehydrated. And they did that. Yeah. And I think the people went in and somehow things got settled down. Yeah. So that's what we'll do here too. Yeah. Or everywhere we go, if there's discord, you invite people in, offer them tea, yeah, and some snacks. And they may be all angry as hell, but that doesn't matter. You know, if you show a little bit of kindness, hopefully it pays off. If they scream back at you, you just, keep showing your kindness, and you state what we don't believe in violence. Yeah, we believe in discussion. Please come and discuss with us. Yeah. And to say that in that tone of voice, not, you people, we don't believe in arguing and fighting, come in and sit down. No, what do they say? The media is the message. So you have to, say it in a way that corresponds with what you feel. Yeah. So I'm saying all of this because, it's one thing to say that we should react calmly and with, compassion and wanting to settle things in a peaceful way. But it's another thing when the situation's right in front of you. Yeah. And I think this is why it can be very helpful in our Dharma practice to imagine situations. Maybe don't start out with this one, but situations of conflict, or maybe situations you had in the past of conflict with people, and imagine being there and holding on to your values and your principles and acting accordingly. And to imagine this in your meditation. If you start to get angry again because you're imagining something from the past, stop your mind and go, that is just a conceptual thought. Nothing is happening right now. Yeah. And even if something were happening right now, how we frame it influences how we react. Do we reframe it as somebody is attacking me? Or do we reframe it as somebody is in pain and they're in anger? Yeah. Because somebody is in pain and they're angry because they're in pain. Yeah. That doesn't mean I have to be in pain and get angry too. Yeah. But we need to really practice this in our meditation, um, so we gain some kind of familiarity with how to calm our own mind down uh, in different events. Yeah. And as somebody who's studied history a lot, I found that very helpful because I didn't just study, this happened and that happened at this date and that date, but I read books from people who lived through that. And then I imagined being that person in that situation. And you imagine experiencing what they're experiencing. How would I want to act? And how do I need to think and calm my own mind so that I could act in that way? Yeah. So this kind of meditation I find very, very helpful. Yeah. That's not to say that I'm not going to, you know, dissolve in who knows what in an actual situation. But maybe some of this has had, you plant seeds in your own mind. And then if there's enough familiarity, if a situation comes up, you can go back to that. Yeah. So, yeah. So the point is, don't blow things up out of proportion. Yeah. The sky isn't falling, even though there's people on social media going totally crazy. Yeah. We don't need to join in the craziness. What we need to do is, you know, know what our values and principles are and stick to them. Yeah. Yeah. Even if people are yelling and screaming at us, even if they do attack us. Yeah. I remember there was somebody who came the very first winter that we were here, and and she was quite a character. And she told me a story of how she would sometimes intervene in conflicts that were going on. Yeah. And uh, what do they call it? Domestic violence is one of the things that the police hate the most. They really do not like going when called about domestic violence because it's such an emotional situation. People are totally freaked out. So, this lady was telling me that one day she was at a park and there was, one man just totally screaming at his wife or girlfriend or whoever it was. Yeah. And and she was afraid it would escalate. So she went in. She just went up to them in the park. And what did she do? She started acting, doing a dance or doing something really strange. Yeah. And the people had to stop and, like, what's going on here? this day lady coming and, doing a dance and singing. But what it did was it broke the energy. Yeah. And that's often, what's needed when, there's a confrontation like that. Yeah. So to remember things like that and to remember that sometimes we need to break our own energy because we're the ones who are, super inflating something. Yeah. And so this is one of the reasons why I find humor quite, uh, quite good. Yeah, quite, yeah, useful in those situations. Yeah. Somebody else wrote me today, just, so you guys don't know, I'm kind of just hanging out, twiddling my thumbs, reading the news all day. Uh, Somebody wrote me and was saying that she's noticed that sometimes, she'll get upset or she's in pain. She doesn't feel well. She's in pain or she's upset, but she doesn't say anything to people because if she did, then that wouldn't look so good. So she just kind of goes off and, and sits there and, waits for somebody to come and say, oh, is something wrong? Okay. How many of you know this routine besides me? Yeah. Okay. So I haven't responded to her yet, but you know that that's it's manipulation, isn't it? And she was saying she was confessing it to me because she's saying it's deceptive. I'm pretending on one side that nothing's wrong, but then I'm sitting there and nurturing a pity party waiting for somebody to come and say, oh, you poor baby, the world's so mean to you. Well, no, that's not what we want. We want them to really, oh, you're upset, tell me about it. And then we could just go with all of our stuff. Okay, so when I notice that I'm doing that, okay, what I'll do is I'll I'll ham it up in my I just I see that I'm doing that, so I just sit down and I imagine all these people, all of you are coming in and you bowing and scraping and saying, oh, you poor dear, you're in pain. What did we do? It's our fault. Oh, please forgive us. We want you to be happy. And in my meditation and just totally ham it up because this is what I want. I want people to join in my pity party and accept responsibility for my emotions. Yeah. And when I ham it up like this, then I have to laugh. Yeah. Because it is hysterical if you think about it. Yeah. So, I find humor quite useful in these kinds of situations. You can think of it next time, and then you'll go, "Oh, she said to use humor, but I don't feel funny. Why is she telling me this?" And then you get pity party times two. Yeah, because you're initially angry and feeling mad at your pain or the other person, whatever it was. Now you're mad at me too. Yeah, real explosive, go for it. Okay. Uh, and eventually you do this enough that when you can see your mind is playing that routine again, you can just go in and say, okay, I'm playing that routine. Stop, cut it. And, you know, you can do that. But it takes some practice.